This is the best of First and Last, the podcast.
The results. Wow. So for anyone who happened to miss it yesterday, in which God help your soul if you missed out on what occurred yesterday, but we had New Year's Day in college football, the way we had drawn it up in this new era of the college football playoff. There had been some gripes about the way that this unfolded in the last couple of seasons where you had games actually played on New Year's Eve, the college football playoff semifinals. It was something that a lot of people lamented because, hell, most of you got plans. Most of you are unlike me and not in bed at 10 o'clock on New Year's Eve. And so you have plans and you had things to do. Well, this year we got exactly what we were looking for, which was an NFL Sunday ripe with playoff implication that led right into one of the more entertaining days of college football that I can remember. Because from the time we hit noon, you had games going all through yesterday that culminated in the college football playoff games. And after especially what took place in the Peach Bowl, where we'll talk about UCF and what their win over Auburn potentially means for that program, our perception of the group of five going forward, we thought, okay, high bar to clear, starting with the Rose Bowl, and it delivered. So in the college football playoff games yesterday, we had Georgia over Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl, 54-48 in a 2-overtime game for the ages. And Alabama beating number one Clemson 24-6 in the Sugar Bowl in the late game to set an all-SEC national championship. But man, it feels like a disservice to not sit and marinate on what we saw in the Sugar Bowl, in the Rose Bowl yesterday. Especially understanding that they had a high bar to clear themselves. Last year's Rose Bowl, maybe one of the best we had ever seen. And last year's Rose Bowl was actually the game that this game beat in a number of respects on all-time Rose Bowl lists. How did Georgia come to this victory? Well, they overcame the largest deficit ever to win a Rose Bowl, beating only the 15-point deficit that USC had last season against Penn State. Georgia down 17 before a late first-half field goal brought it to 14. The most combined points in a Rose Bowl game this year, 102 points, only topping the 101 points from last year's Rose Bowl game. So you're seeing the trend here in a game that certainly maybe not the defensive prowess that one team would have hoped for, but when you go into a game saying we want this strength-on-strength matchup of Baker Mayfield, the Heisman Trophy winner, against this Georgia defense, a Georgia rushing attack as deep and talented as any in the country, you got exactly what you were hoping for in this game. And it all came down to a second overtime play, of course, on the ground, courtesy of Sony Michel, who, along with his cohort Nick Chubb, had the game of their lives.
Michel will take the direct snap and run to his left. Try to turn the corner. He does. The 20, the 10, the 5, touchdown! Sony Michel for the score! And that's how this one will end. 27-yard touchdown out of the Wildcat. And Georgia pours onto the field. The third-ranked Bulldogs will play for the national championship 1 week from tonight in Atlanta.
That was Steve Levy on ESPN Radio with the call. I should have known this one was going to go Georgia's way the minute I saw the Twitter video of Uga, the Bulldog, sauntering down the sideline and realizing if the good boy could get loose on the sideline, then hell, the Dogs were going to get loose all day in this game. Seeing the replay of that final play now, seeing Jake Fromm out on the edge, throwing blocks in this game tells you exactly what this was all about, tells you exactly what kind of effort you saw from the players on both sides, from the coaches on both sides. And one of those coaches, the winning coach in Kirby Smart, stopped to talk to our own Maria Taylor after the game.
All right, Coach, your third blocked field goal of the season results in your team going to a national championship game. How do you describe the way this game ended?
What a game. What an atmosphere. You know, my heart goes out to the Oklahoma team because these guys played their tail off. and so did ours. Nobody ever quit. Everybody fought hard. So proud of these kids and seniors, man. I mean, they never quit.
Let's talk about those seniors. Lorenzo Carter, he gets the blocked field goal, and then you put it in the hands of a senior running back. I mean, what does it mean? These guys came back for this moment, Coach.
Impressive. Character, integrity, proud of them, man. This is a great university, and these kids called their tail off.
In your second year as the head coach at your alma mater, you're taking them to a national championship. Let that soak in and tell me what it means to you.
Go Dogs. Hey, for you too, girl.
Yeah, pretty cool moment for Maria Taylor, the fellow Georgia alum. We've got a number of those at the network who all get to smile pretty wide today as Georgia pulls off an impressive game. And she mentioned it there, to see the effort. I got people during this game, and we saw pretty early on what this was going to look like. Even as Georgia was down in the beginning, so much of their production came in these huge chunk plays on offense. Sony Michel, 75-yard long in the game. Nick Chubb, 50-yard long for a rush in the game, and had multiple over 20 and 30 yards, did the two of them. Because you get the people after the first half where Georgia as a team on 11 rushes was averaging 16 and a half yards per rush. Finished the game averaging a casual 9.3. You get the people, well, what would that average look like if you took out the long run? And then immediately to start the second half, I forget which one it was, but Sony Michel or Nick Chubb broke off an insane long run. And that's when you quickly realize that, oh, wait, big shot plays in the run game is what this team does. So stuff your statistical alterations in a sack and take them with you. We don't need them anymore where we're going. Because this is more of what you can hope to expect now. This was probably the matchup that we should have looked at because we knew Georgia defense was the unit on their side to write home about. We knew Baker Mayfield and Oklahoma offense were the side to take note to. But it was, would Oklahoma's defense be able to stymie that rushing attack? And the answer was a resounding no. 181 yards on the ground for Sony Michel, 146 yards on the ground for Nick Chubb. They combined for the most rush yards by running back teammates in FBS history. Overall, 8,284 yards this season, which is insane. They became the sixth pair of teammates with at least 100 rushing yards in a single Rose Bowl and passed Eric Dickerson and Craig James for that honor of the entire season on that. Worth noting, however, that on the other side, and we'll get more into the capsule of Baker Mayfield, the career, coming up in just a little bit, but the performance he put on last night was obviously special, and we understood that he was sick coming into this game. It had all the makings of the Baker Mayfield great flu game moment, and still managed to put up 48 points on one of the better defenses in the SEC, nay the country. And one brave reporter decided to hit right where it hurt with the winning coach in Kirby Smart and ask him about it.
You're obviously thrilled that you guys won, but is a part of you like dead on the inside as a defensive guy that you gave up 48 points?
Yeah, I'm really disappointed and upset. I didn't think we played to the level we're capable of. I do think that the players fought, and they are a good offensive football team. But, man, we stunk it up and played really bad. I want to give a lot of kudos to the offense for staying behind us and fighting, and the defensive players doing that. But if it was a measure of heart attack, I would be on the Richter scale pretty high.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio. I feel like Kirby Smart, when he heard that answer, because you could tell he was still kind of lighthearted, but he's repeating over and over a mantra I'm sure he's been repeating throughout the process of getting ready to this playoff, and one that's going to be extremely important coming up. Be Nick Saban. Be Nick Saban. You're angry about this win. There is no joy allowed in victory. You're angry about this win. You're already thinking about recruiting. Maybe mention that so people know how serious you are. You can't even enjoy this win or preparing for the next game because you're so far behind on recruiting. Be Nick Saban, be Nick Saban, be Nick Saban. And it worked out for him. So far, so good. He will get to face his former sensei coming up very soon in a game that, after coming off of a defense optional outing, there will be no option in the college football playoff national championship. Defense will be a required portion of your entry into the game.
First and last, the podcast.
I am super excited. The college football playoff is going to be, the national championship is in Atlanta. It's at the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium down there that looks incredible. Excited to see that one in person. But I already saw, like, on the field with Georgia celebrating that win was Quavo from Migos. Like, we are going to hit the epicenter of Southern hip-hop in Atlanta. I can't wait to see who's down there. I am going to tweet relentlessly at the guys from Run the Jewels and see if they will hang out with me at some point in there. I conned one of them into following me on Twitter a while back. I'm going to try and leverage the Golic and Wingo platform in the next few days and see if I can make this work. 'Cause selfishly, listen, I got goals too, all right? This is a business trip. We're going to go down there and work. We got a great game to cover. All SEC National Championship. Alabama, Georgia. Going to be live. But I still got stuff that I need. And this is a big one. This is going to be cool. Kendrick Lamar halftime show. May or may not be doing some stuff with that. We will see. We will keep you posted, but in the meantime, we'll also keep you posted on the teams that are going to be there. And we mentioned it was a a Rose Bowl for the ages. I'm getting excited. I'm getting ahead of myself. Georgia beat Oklahoma in a 2-overtime Rose Bowl. After all of us sat around and said, man, we get a rematch of last year's national championship. Heck, the last 2 national championships in the semifinals, so we finally get some new blood in the championship game. And it ended up being we got to the Sugar Bowl and said, all right, well, now you guys have the unrealistic expectations to live up to, so good luck. Go do the sports. And while it was entertaining, I don't know if we could say it quite lived up to anything that we saw in the Sugar Bowl. Alabama gets a decisive 24-6 victory, but giving Clemson some credit, it was a lot closer than that until about 5 minutes left in the third quarter. It was a 10-6 game coming out of the half, a lot of defense in the first half. Alabama on the defensive side of the ball looked as good as we had seen them since the beginning of the year, and it was that classic trap that we fall into with them where Alabama gets time and space to rest and recover, and they take full advantage of it, and they bring out a performance on defense that Nick Saban complimentary, called ferocious.
Tell you what, it was a ferocious effort by the defensive players, and we did what we had to do on offense. We tried to shorten the game a little bit and run the ball and keep the ball away from them, and I think it was a great team effort, and I think everyone on our team contributed to that effort. But just ferocious competitive spirit by our defensive players, and Clemson's got a great team, and they do a great job, and I was really pleased with the result that we got out there today.
First and last of Mike Golic Jr. Nick Saban, the opposite of his old defensive coordinator Kirby Smart, the Georgia head coach who gave up 48 in their game. Nick Saban sat here smiling ear to ear, which is not that far apart because Nick Saban doesn't really smile all that much. But seeing the way that defense attacked a Clemson offense that finally felt the effects of all of their marquee talent from last year leaving, especially at the quarterback position when it got to some of these gritty moments. And you heard, Christian Wilkins on the sideline, one of their defensive leaders, going over to the offense when they were hanging their head saying, we're still in this game. But they had to overcome what really was a 13-second stint from hell for Georgia. And really what ended the entire game was Deron Payne. It was a one-man wrecking crew. And it's only right in a game that's named after and in honor of Sugar that we get a big man making big plays, busting this thing wide open. Give him the Heisman Trophy for 2018 already. You're not going to see better than Deron Payne's 13 seconds. He lived his best life for every person that's ever been over 275 pounds and told they've got high levels of triglycerides in their blood. For anyone who's ever self-described themselves as pre-diabetic, for anyone that's ever looked at 2 donuts and a meat product and said, I have found a sandwich, Deron Payne is your golden god. And he sat up there and did it last night. An interception off a tipped Kelly Bryant pass that he takes down near the goal line, only to follow it up a mere 13 seconds later, catching a 1-yard touchdown pass on a clear pick route. Clearly set by one of his other defensive lineman teammates, because only Alabama would put not one but 2 D linemen in the backfield and say, you're going to catch a pass. Here was Daron Payne, the conquering hero after the game.
It is a 4-point game. Clemson has the momentum, and you get that pick.
Yes, ma'am.
What did you see on that play that allowed you to get that?
I was just reading my keys, and I seen Anthony Jennings rushing that edge real good, and I seen the ball come out, and I just caught it and tried to go as far as I can.
So then they call your number on offense at the goal line, and you've had that package in before, but at what point did you know they were going to actually throw it to you?
We've been running it for a minute now, but I didn't think they were going to do it this early. But I'm so happy they did it, and I'm blessed, and just thankful for the opportunity.
How many touchdown passes do you have in your career that you've caught?
I caught one in high school, and then this one, so that'll be my second one.
How good are those hands?
Yeah, they excellent. They should put me at wide receiver.
Okay, I think we'll see more of it. Winning this game, you already have the paper in your hand that says sweet revenge. What was this like to put all those questions to rest about were you good enough still?
Me and my teammates, we did a lot of hard work coming up here, and we just wanted to prove all the doubters and the naysayers that we are a really dominant team and we haven't lost anything.
Georgia, Alabama, what does that sound like for a national championship?
That sounds good. 2 SEC teams going at it. I'm ready to get after it.
What's the most dangerous thing in college football? A motivated, ferocious Alabama defense that didn't play for their conference title and had 40-some-odd days where Nick Saban let them know about it. Job well done.
First and last, the podcast. First and last, the podcast.
How do you feel about the All-SEC National Championship? And looking at this matchup and looking at the complaints that are going to come from a situation that we always knew was possible. The one thing that we always talked about in the college football playoff was, when are they going to have that first? 2 teams from the same conference. Well, the reality that we didn't really ever consider and all that, because we were so focused on that, is what happens when both of those teams are the ones to make it to the championship. That was the reality I'd never really heard discussed, but now that we're there, we get to deal with a new set of problems. That's really what every year in the college football playoff committee life is dealing with a new set of problems that comes along. Because in the last couple of years, we've introduced some interesting ideas. We've challenged the notion of what a conference championship can mean. We've challenged if it's best and most deserving, and we haven't gotten answers that are overly consistent, because that's what we asked for. I'll keep going back to it. I always said, give me the BCS computers, because at least I know the formula. I may disagree with it. Maybe we can tweak it, but at least I know what's going into that, and it's consistent. And now, if you look at the first few years of the College Football Playoff Committee, that Final Four has been the same as the BCS computers would have spit out for the most part. So, complain however you will, because we seem to ask for the best until it doesn't represent what we want. Like Jeff Kenner on Twitter tweets in, a 14 playoff isn't good enough. It doesn't effectively represent the FBS. Expand the opportunity to 8 teams. Well, this wasn't about effectively representing anything as far as I'm concerned. I thought we wanted this because we wanted to pick the 4 best teams and give them a shot. Now we want to make sure it's representative. Now, that's not how the game goes. We can't keep moving the goalposts around when we're mad about something, but when you're talking about the college football community, part of the reason college football is so great is because it is such a large body of teams. It's 128 teams at the FBS level. It's these 5 major, these 5 Power 5 conferences, the group of 5. It's so vast and varied. You can have so many good teams that you can feel strongly about and no way to accurately measure them all against each other that you're never wrong. And they're all not paid, so we don't have to feel bad about the huge sums of money that they're making, and we can look and judge them accordingly. That part of it too, but we'll focus on the other stuff for right now, because I don't want to get up on my horse on that one this early in the morning. It's 4 a.m. We've been going for an hour, though. I'm a little revved up right now. Little extra. First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. So it's deciding what we're all about in this. Deciding what we're going to see in the national title is pretty easy, though. Like, you can look at this matchup and you can be upset about it because of how we got there, or I think more justifiably, you can be a little bummed because I think the product that we're going to get is going to be one that, compared to what we've seen the last couple of years and compared to what we got in the Rose Bowl, is not going to be near as visually pleasing. It's still going to be entertaining if you're a diehard, because Alabama's rush defense last night and defense in general looked insane. That looked like the standard we're used to seeing around there. Georgia's rushing attack was out of control, even though the defense didn't necessarily showed up. And give credit to some brave reporter who, after that game, a game where the Georgia defense, as vaunted as it is, gave up 48 points, someone had the gall to go and ask Kirby Smart the tough question.
You're obviously thrilled that you guys won, but is a part of you like dead on the inside as a defensive guy that you gave up 48 points?
Yeah, I'm really disappointed and upset. I didn't think we played to the level we're capable of. I do think that the players fought, and they are a good offensive football team. But, man, we stunk it up and played really bad. I want to give a lot of kudos to the offense for staying behind us and fighting, and the defensive players doing that. But if it was a measure of heart attack, I would be on the Richter scale pretty high.
First and last, Michael Oak Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. So you had that on one side, a former Nick Saban disciple disappointed in the way that his outfit performed on one side of the ball. And then you had an unusually, dare I say, kind of happy Nick Saban looking at his defensive performance.
Tell you what, it was a ferocious effort by the defensive players, and we did what we had to do on offense. We tried to shorten the game a little bit and run the ball and keep the ball away from them. And I think it was a great team effort, and I think everyone on our team contributed to that effort. But just ferocious competitive spirit by our defensive players. And Clemson's got a great team, and they do a great job. And I was really pleased with the result that we got out there today.
The most dangerous thing that exists in college football is a Nick Saban team that he has the ammo to motivate. And he got that by not appearing in their conference title game, by losing in the Iron Bowl, and by having that material to take to his team and say, you put yourself in a position where we were even questioned going into this, and you invited all the criticism that you have gotten. And you heard his players talking about it after the game. We wanted to show that we haven't fallen off, that we're still a dominant force in this college football landscape. Mission accomplished last night. For everyone that wants to argue the place for UCF in all of this, the place for Ohio State coming off of great bowl performances for them, I don't know, man. Alabama made it awfully hard on you last night, taking what we had crowned the number one team in college football based on their resume this season and dismantling them in a matter of about 13 seconds in the third quarter of that game. 888-SAY-ESPN. Let's go to Ken in Pennsylvania. Ken, you're on first and last. What's going on?
Hey, good morning, Mike. Thanks for putting me on, and great program. I'm really enjoying it. Iowa State fan, so I have a little different dog in this fight, but the first thing is I'm not going to watch this national championship. I don't want to see two SEC teams play. And moreover, I think the top six teams are all kind of like wild cards. I think any of them are capable of winning the national championship. Ohio State won their conference. They should have been in. I understand Alabama did not win their conference, but, you know, they're obviously a top six team and maybe even the top team. But they didn't win the game against the team, Auburn, that beat the two teams that are in the national championship and then proceeded to lose to a team that ran the table. UCF has the biggest argument. If I had to make my vote at the end of the season, I would, even with the BCS, I would vote UCF as the national champion. That's my opinion.
I look forward to hearing later on your sentiment there echoed by the guys in the Dan Le Batard show. I'm sure UCF is going to be crowned national champions by Stu Gatz, and it's going to be a glorious moment for them, and they should hang that banner in the rafters. If I'm UCF, I'm leaning all the way into this, by the way. I'm leaning all the way into this. Danny White, the UCF AD, agrees.
National champs! Undefeated!
I'm shouting it from the rooftops. If I'm them, you can't tell me nothing right now. Nothing. Got a great story, a linebacker with one hand going out there and absolutely dominating during that game. UCF taking all that narrative about not being able to win up front, something that I generally subscribe to about Group of Five teams. I think there is a gross mismatch in the trenches. But UCF, to their credit, what Scott Frost helped build there, and what we'll be very interested to see if they can maintain once he has left. But I still don't fully agree with that. Using bowl games as a justification, especially when they're not in the pursuit of a national championship is always a dicey opportunity, but even more so because of the layoff. Like, you get that entire time to game plan and prepare for one game if you're UCF. You can put it all into that. You don't have to worry about playing a game after that. You don't have to worry about playing this game in real time. Now, I understand the layoff also benefits Alabama, and they thrive in that system, but part of the reason is because they play a more consistently physical and daunting schedule than I think anyone's going to argue that UCF did. You can argue for the strength of it, but you can't argue for the weekly challenge for those guys the way they were. And that may not take away from them still being a great team, but if you're going to try and just use that win-loss resume against it, you're probably going to lose me. Because again, it's just going to be hard for any of these group of 5 teams to overcome that burden. The only one that got close was Houston, because you've got to schedule at some point some major Power 5 team. You've got to hope that they're good when you're not consistently scheduling that way, when you're not consistently going after teams that we look at and acknowledge as part of the college football elite week after week. It just ain't how the game go, even if you're built well enough. It can only be so discerning. So there you're asking us to look and discern the best team, but when we try and do it with Alabama, all of a sudden it becomes a little more problematic just because the wins aren't where you want them to be. This, by the way, the idea that winning a conference championship should be your golden ticket, again, seems arbitrary. If you want to throw that in to the ring with all this, giving away a regional championship that you win that in no way shows me where you stack up within the rest of college football. Like, there's the problem, is you can't measure across teams. People are going to lament the fact that 9 and 7 teams in the NFL make it to the playoffs. Well, I've at least seen them cross-pollinate with the rest of the league, so I kind of know and have a better idea where they stack up. You can be 12-0 all you want in college football. There's still a good chance I don't know where you sit within the rest of this. And so that's why this gets to be tough.
First and last, the podcast. First and last, the podcast.
Georgia and Alabama meeting in the college football playoff national championship down in Atlanta. Migo's probably going to be there. Quavo was on the sideline with Georgia yesterday. It's lit. We're all very excited, except for everyone that didn't want the SEC to have 2 teams in here to begin with. And you got all the ammo you needed for that sort of hate fuel this weekend with what we saw out of first Ohio State, who went out, put a beat down on against USC in their bowl game. An Ohio State team that really, looking at that performance, should be more angry than ever, and maybe took some of that anger out on USC because that was a talented, maybe the most talented team in college football that never seemed to be able to just hold focus from week to week. And because of that, despite winning a conference championship, we looked at them and said, too inconsistent. One thing we have learned as we look in the college football playoff world, the one thing we've learned without a shadow of a doubt is if you get blown out by a mediocre to bad team, you have no place in the committee's college football playoff Final Four. It's just not how. There are things we're not sure what exactly gets you in, but we know for damn sure what keeps you out. And that is one of the bullet points on the list. So that's a big no-no right there. But the other team that's going to have people up in arms is UCF and what we saw from Scott Frost in Central Florida. And it's so strange the way this came about, because for the post-game presser for this game, and UCF beat Auburn. Yeah, that Auburn, 34-27 in a really closely contested game. And when we're even now, you come in this morning, and I always mention in the sound system here, we've got labels for everything. And it's listed as UCF sound from Nebraska head coach Scott Frost. That was the weird middle ground we lived in this game, where we had seen last year when you had Lane Kiffin, who was getting ready to take over the job at FAU, too distracted for Nick Saban's liking to coach in that game. Jeremy Pruitt, who's getting ready to take over the Tennessee job, performed a little better, a little more focused there. And Scott Frost, who was getting ready to go take over at his alma mater and had the early signing period to deal with and everything else that comes along with recruiting in this day and age in college football, still managed to stay with a team that had accomplished so much this season and go out there and get a win against a team that for a while we thought maybe the best in college football despite having 2 losses. Well, he had something to say yesterday about the lack of respect that they had gotten from the committee.
Going through the season, I was afraid to say much about the rankings and everything because I'm a little superstitious, and just when a coach starts running his mouth, that's when you lose the next game. It wasn't right. I was watching every week. The committee sit in a room and decide this 2-loss team must be better than UCF because UCF's in the American, or this 3-loss team must be better than UCF. It looked like a conscious effort to me to make sure that they didn't have a problem. If they put us too high and a couple teams ahead of us lost, they don't know, now we got to put them in the playoff. Well, we just beat a team that beat 2 playoff teams and lost to another one by 6 points, and we beat them by 7. And Auburn's a great team. I'm not taking anything away from them. I give them a ton of credit. These guys deserve everything they get, and they deserve more credit from the committee than what they got.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app, and that will be a rallying cry for a lot of people who just don't want to see 2 SEC teams in there. I can't imagine there's a ton of people that really care truly about the fate of UCF. But they want to stick to this ideal that they've built up in college football, which is that everyone should have a shot, which is dangerous more often than it is helpful or productive. I don't know how UCF would have fared. That's a darn good football team that we saw in a lot of different aspects of that. And maybe they would have fared well. But in general, when we look at the things that will keep you out, we just mentioned one of the things that keep you out will be getting blown out by a mediocre to bad team. The other thing that will keep you out is playing in the group of 5 and not having a marquee Power 5 win on your schedule. We saw Houston get close. We saw that's what they had. But you look at the rest of the schedule for UCF this season. And beating up within the conference on South Florida and then playing an really exciting conference championship game against Memphis. All of that doesn't erase the fact that other than that, you look on that schedule, I mean, who's the best win that you can find there? Obviously, had to, like the rest of the Florida teams, overcome some early season lumps, losing, or the game against Georgia Tech canceled, Maine canceled. But you play FIU, Navy maybe on there, Temple was a bowl team that they played. But we always talk about that search for marquee wins, and when you have to overcome that perception that playing in the group of 5 is not a place that we're going to give the benefit of the doubt to, I feel bad for UCF, but at the same time, I can understand why. There's just a difference in the level. There's a reason we separate the Power 5 and the group of 5, and why generally outside of these bowl game settings, those matchups don't go all too well. There's a reason. Bowl games are just a different breed of animal. Now, for Scott Frost personally, good win for him. Goes out in a high note with that program and never has to worry about this problem again, because if you go undefeated or have one loss at Nebraska, you're in. And it's unfortunate because this will probably be a one-off for the kids at UCF. Like, I understand they've had success, even going back to when Blake Bortles was there. That was a team that got to play in a pretty nice bowl game and enjoyed a lot of success. But ultimately, you wonder if it's sustainable out there to have this kind of a national footprint, even in the state of Florida, that right now is seen as much coaching upheaval, has seen as many new faces in there, and as many distinct and impactful ones. What we can see. I still do love, though, because I said, this isn't a knock on UCF. This is just understanding perception in the process. UCF, run wild with this. Follow the lead of your AD, Danny White, who said this after the game.
National champs, undefeated.
I mean, play it till the cows come home. I tell everyone, I would work hard to claim this.
National champs, undefeated.
I don't know the process you got to go through to that. I'm putting a banner up. I'm putting it in the stadium. No one's going to tell me any different. You want to come and take it down? Take it away. Pry it from my cold, dead fingers, but until you tell me otherwise, we won undefeated. We won our bowl game against a team that for a while you thought was the best. National champs. Sing it from the mountaintops, Danny.
National champs. Undefeated.
First and last, the podcast.
We had some very strong feelings last night from one of the losing teams, a quarterback who is going to end up with his storied college career as almost anyone that we've seen, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, Baker Mayfield from the Oklahoma Sooners, who was well documented, was sick, flu-like symptoms all throughout the week, and went out there and still spilled his guts last night. And you heard very palpable emotion from a guy who's just trying to reconcile the fact that he doesn't get to wear that Oklahoma on his chest anymore.
Can't believe it's over. It's been a wild ride.
Really hard to get through much else other than that when you believe that you were the best, that you carry such a chip on your shoulder in the way Baker Mayfield did. And we know all the hot button words with Baker, but one thing he is all in. Like, you don't have that level of brashness without having the utmost confidence in yourself and your teammates and the belief that you were the best team when you step out onto that field. And so when you've got that, you open yourself up to the deepest amount of pain possible. And there's part of me that definitely appreciates that. Now going forward, it gets interesting in how we judge this, how we judge where this all goes, because we've now seen all of the marquee quarterback prospects that are going to come out in the draft this season. And by C, I mean they've played what would have been their final games, excluding Josh Rosen, who we know was held out, still in the concussion protocol for UCLA's bowl game. Didn't get to see him play. But we've seen Sam Darnold. We've seen Josh Allen. We've seen Baker Mayfield. Josh Rosen has played his final game. Can even throw Lamar Jackson's an interesting one because I forgot that he's a junior, and we talk about him in the same breath as all of these guys and his pro prospects going forward. And the idea that he could come out as an underclassman, but in a quarterback class this stacked, you wonder if there is some advantage to him coming back and continuing to build on the stellar college resume that he has built and the improvement he has seen. But the question now becomes is what do we do about Baker? Because I think most people have agreed that he's played himself into the first round. That seems to be the consensus down the stretch, and we begin that part of the season where we see these wild swings and falls based on the interview process and based on the measurements that we see. All things that, at least the measurement process, probably won't be as kind to Baker Mayfield as it will be the other more prototypical passers. And we live in a time again where you're judged more on what we think we can do with you than what we've seen you actually do. Now, we've got immediate rebuttals to that. Performances like what we saw out of Deshaun Watson last season in the NFL, who had the most accomplished resume of any quarterback last year and still saw himself slip down in the first round further than most people thought he should have gone and got to say, look, I told you so when he got to Sundays. But that still doesn't change the model that the NFL uses to draft. And so I'm wondering if any of this was enough to shake up what I feel like is inevitable, which is NFL teams, specifically the Cleveland Browns, overdrafting a player. Because at this point it feels like that. I mean, there's talks about people asking if Sam Darnold should go back to school. Guy who's got all the traits in the world, but clearly had a down year relative to the standard last season that had him as the presumptive Heisman favorite entering week 1 of this season. This is what we tend to do, and I feel like nothing is going to change. This feels almost predetermined that those 3 quarterbacks are all going to go ahead of Baker Mayfield. And I'm not even sold with 100% certainty that Baker Mayfield is going to be the best pro, but this could wind up, he could be the guy that ends up in the best situation by winding up all the way at the bottom of the first round, more than likely. Because we're going to be wowed with arm talent. We're going to be wowed with all these pro traits. But these are going to be guys that all certainly have warts. And man, this just reeks of Cleveland finding a way, especially now, given the situation they're in, because they've come under fire through so much of this. Quarterbacks indicating behind closed doors, Josh Rosen talking about he would entertain the idea of staying in school rather than being drafted a Brown, understands the value of being drafted late to the right team rather than early to the wrong team. It seems like the Browns are going to do what they've tried to avoid doing under Saji Brown, which is overdrafting at that spot. Now, a few notable misses that have worked out well at other teams that I still don't buy would have worked out perfectly with the Browns based on what we've seen from them development-wise. But now all of a sudden you've got that in the pocket as a team that, you know, with John Dorsey there, talked about wanting to get Hugh Jackson real, quote, real players. That means the quarterback spot. That means they're going to draft a quarterback. And what do you do if you draft high at one of these guys and understand that it's going to be a project in a place where you're going to need immediate results? It feels like a situation where one of these quarterbacks is going to get Hugh Jackson fired, because that's the other trend we've seen. Is when you draft a young quarterback and a coach is already there, you have to make that hard decision of who we want developing him. And based on that record, 1 win in the last 2 years, I wouldn't feel good about my chances if I'm Hugh Jackson, despite the vote of confidence.
Thank you for listening to the First and Last podcast. You can listen and subscribe to all ESPN podcasts in the Listen tab of the ESPN app. First and Last.